Welcome back, everybody, to Believe in Baylor. I am your host, Alvin Cowan, writer, actor, podcaster, and washed-up quarterback here to talk to you about all things for your future Big 12 champion, Baylor Bears. I apologize for this hairstyle for those of you watching on YouTube. Good Lord. Anyway, we are back today with our second part of our conversation with Ethan Young, talking all things NIL, revenue sharing, money in football, money in college football, money in the business of college football. It's a fascinating conversation. We dropped part one last week, and this is the second part of that conversation. For those of you that are interested in a deep dive in the business of college football, really appreciate you listening. Part two with Ethan Young right now.
And so it's attached entity, but it's separate from the NCAA. It's got its own membership. It's got its own leader. They brought in a high-level executive from Major League Baseball to come in and run it. A big part of what they're doing is addressing this revenue sharing and scrutinizing deals, right? So what they've come out and said is that every deal is going to have to come through us, and we are going to say yes or no if this is valid, and if it has valid business practice. And so if it doesn't have valid function as a business deal, they're going to not allow it, and it's not going to be received. And that's it. And so you made a point, hey, that's a lot of money that came out in the CSC's first reporting. Well, a couple things there. One, that's amongst all sports, right? So you start talking about a lot of constituents there, not just football. And, we all know football drives a lot of the money, but when you start doing the math of like, hey, we got 68 Power 4 programs, so we divide 600 by that, and we got 5 major revenue sharing sports on a campus, so divide that again. Oh man, that's only like $1 million per sport. That's not that on a $13 million football budget. That's not very much money per team. And then you go, okay, well, also the quarterback's making 80% of that. So like, is it that much money, or is it just the quarterback's getting a sweetener at a lot of these places that is market driven? So I would also say I would question the CSC's reporting. So in their first release of this data, let's even take a step back. The projection of this data by a company called Open Doors was projected to be at $1.6 billion. That's how much NIL, separate of revenue sharing, was going to be worth. And that scared everybody in the sport. They're like, this is, we can't put the toothpaste back in the can. Like, what are we going to do? And then to hear the number was 600 was, oh, that's a lot smaller than 1.6. Well, that's interesting. Okay, well, it turns out that 600 number is not even right for all sports, because half of that is proposed deals that haven't passed through the clearinghouse yet. So Deloitte, the company executing the CSC's NIL Go, had a mix-up in the reporting that they released to Yahoo that it's really only 300. When you go, okay, well, now these numbers are getting really small. When you start doing all this dividing by the number of programs, number of teams, like, oh. And by the way, they're manually reviewing deals. Well, that's weird. They have 3 people that work for them. So like now they have all these workflow problems, and you're like, how much of this is really real? And we're way under projection here. So what is this? And I think that what we're starting to realize, like a lot of these projections, what is NIL, was fraudulent. It was donor driven. It was pay for play. And that's not going to be allowed to continue. And it hasn't been since July 1st. They've rejected deals, and they've certainly made their fair amount of screw ups, right? Like they didn't handle collectives as valid businesses, because there are collectives doing valid business out there properly. They just tried to say no on all of them, and that they got sued and lost, right? Or they got threatened of sued and they caved on that issue. And so like between the reporting failings, that there's been some hiccups, there's no question, but we've also seen scrutiny for the first time. And that's what's fascinating. To me, that's higher level fascinating in terms of the parity of the sport, the future of the sport. How do we govern the sport going forward? Because all it takes is a little scrutiny, and then people start lining up and behaving, right? And then when people start lining up and behaving, we're going to start seeing a closer to professional model. And will the deals come through from a donor who's able to do legalese to get it around? The oil baron really wants to give the quarterback money. He's going to find his buddy that owns a car dealership down the street to give him the money? Yes. We all know they're going to find loopholes. But that's going to be, we saw it right now with the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard. That's happening in the NBA. Is anyone claiming and saying that NBA is unbalanced and unfair? No. Like, that's going to happen at critical mass. We're going to get to people finding loopholes. But again, I think that's all within the margin, the economics of 15 to 20%. Maybe it's 25, but like, it's not this doubling that everybody's claiming. Now, are schools going to cheat? Yes. I know for a fact there are programs that have said, screw this. It's too complicated. Let's go back to giving cash to kids and dropping bags on doorsteps. And hopefully there's some scrutiny that comes with that too, because then we're back to the original model. But I do go back to, even in that, at least schools have a chance now that want to do it the right way, because we've given them $13.5 million on a $20 million athletics budget to fight the bagmen, right? And all right, hey, they get 15 to 20% kicker on third-party endorsement deals because they're a large brand and they're doing illegal stuff. Maybe they can get up to double, but 2x is a lot. On a 13 million versus 26 million, at least you're bringing a knife to a gunfight versus before. When I first got to UCLA, I didn't even have a water balloon in a gunfight, and I had $0, and there were schools throwing, six figures around for kids. And it's like, okay, we got no shot there on some of the top guys. So the reality is it's going to be hard for this to all play out tomorrow. So I get fans' frustration when it's like, this is so complex, but we've headed in a direction for constraint, and we've seen evidence of constraint, and that's fascinating.
That becomes, I see why your fascination is there, because it leads to more South Florida's beating Florida, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Indiana,
it's the NCAA tournament in basketball, right?
Say it again.
We get more upsets. We get more parity across the sport.
Totally.
Maybe the NCAA tournament's a bad example, but it's fascinating. That's what drives March Madness, right? Is the fact that Davidson can beat the number 1 seed or whatever, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, Indiana made the college football playoff in the first year of this era. Like, the new era was the playoff plus NIL, right? And plus the portal. Craziness. It's the end of the world. Indiana made it. How is this the most imbalanced era ever? Indiana couldn't ever make a bowl game historically.
Yeah.
They hire the right coach who brings in the right players, and he had the right enough resources that everybody else had, and they did it.
That will upset many SEC and Big Ten fans, but I think you're well said to say that that's what's best for the sport overall, but the power brokers probably won't like that much.
No, look, but I'll share this. Like, let's go back to the Indiana example. That's a Big Ten team, right? It's a level playing field for everybody. Now, the conventional powers aren't going to like it, and we've seen them fight tooth and nail, but so many of them are so confident that they can find ways around this stuff that they're not actually that worried about it. I've seen many an AD and a head coach at those schools and just my dealings in this space take a tenor of like, yeah, we're ex school, and not just, but we're Notre Dame, and not that Notre Dame has ever said this or anybody at Notre Dame has said this, but like somebody saying something like that, like, oh, we'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I think some of them are in for a rude awakening if they don't take this playbook seriously of adapting to this new era of they're going to rest on their laurels of their brand in the Big Ten, in the SEC, and their counterparts in league that take this seriously, like in Indiana, are going to lap them. And the schools in lesser leagues like South Florida are going to lap them.
One more question kind of in the general space that we're talking about, and then I kind of have a curiosity question, and then I want you to talk a little Baylor football with me. But talk to me about how all of this impacts the non-revenue sports. What do you see as their future? How or how not are they involved in all of this? Speak to non-revenue.
Yeah, it's a vital part of this, right? And there's so much at stake for not having a holistic view of the athletic department for a fan or for an operator, right? And understanding the economics. And I'll give you an example. At Stephen F. Austin right now, they're cutting multiple sports, and it's really unfortunate. I'll hyperfixate on one sport they're cutting in particular is their women's bowling team. And why that's relevant, Alvin, is their women's bowling team is one of the best in the country. They We're 6th in one of the latest polls. Tremendous program, have had great success. And that program is disappearing. And that's so unfortunate because not only are they successful and relevant, they've been on SportsCenter more in the last calendar year than their football team has. It's based on bad economics that run from football. So football makes 85% of the revenue, and IOTA's more profit than every other sport because no other sport is reliably solvent, including men's basketball on many campuses across this country. But the hyperfixation that smaller level schools have on those economics, we got to win in football, we got to spend in football. Well, they'll lose $20 million in football, like a Stephen F. Austin. And then they'll go, oh, we're bleeding, we got to cut all these other sports. And it's like, well, no, the problem is you're overspending in football. Like, your football program is never going to make $25 million in this iteration of Stephen F. Austin football. Now, maybe if you get pulled up into another league, you can iterate, but that's not where you're at. They need to be taking the Division II viewpoint of hey, here's what the sport brings in. Here's your bottom line. Here's what we spent. Here's what we made last year. Here's what you can spend. And you're not getting 3 meals a day for your athletes. You're X, Y, Z. And it's that's the way these sports all survive. And Division II is thriving right now. They're adding sports at a lot of these campuses because they're taking responsible stewardship. And look, a lot of that is passed on to the athletes. We got to be clear, right? When you're not giving an athlete 3 meals a day, the athlete's paying themselves. But if the athlete wants to participate in the sport, like you and I did when we were in high school, we got to pay for our own meals, right? That's part of it. And the women's bowling team at Stephen F. Austin wants to continue participating. They're suing the school to do so. That's going to cost them money too. They're not going to mind paying for their lunch. Let's make the football team pay for their lunch so that school can offer the sport that exists. Because unfortunately, Stephen F. Austin football doesn't deserve financially to buy their kids lunch. That's the unfortunate economical truth of their situation. So don't follow the limelight of, well, football is the key. And, well, we have more football fans than women's volleyball fans. Sure, but proportionally, football deserves, and I'm making up these percentages, 40% of your budget. You're giving it 80. Women's bowling deserves 2% of your budget. Well, you want to give it 0. Why not just give it 2, right? And base it on reality and the economics of your campus unit. And so what I worry about in revenue sharing is we have this new expensive line item for the Power 4 schools. And we've seen it. Washington State has cut athletics programs. This isn't just Stephen F. Austin problem, right? This is happening across the country, and it's going to continue to happen. That they've cut sports, and I worry that they see this, we have this new $20 million line item to be competitive, and to find this money, we have to cut all these other sports. No, that's the wrong answer. The right answer is, hey, football, liquidity-wise, we can support a budget of $9 million a year. We can support a budget of $4 million a year. Whatever that answer is, find the answer within your current economics. And look, should player salary be above coach compensation? Yes. That's going to lead to wins more than coach compensation is. I'm just telling you. Study it. In the NFL, there's a reason that drives wins and losses, right? And are there one-off examples? Of course. But build your economics first. Here's our capabilities. Here's what's important. And go from there. Because Stephen F. Austin is cutting women's bowling when they should be cutting their football training costs, their football facility costs, right? That's where they should be pulling player compensation from if they want to have a chance of making a model that works year over year and a flywheel that drives them to their goals. The goal of spending in football, that's an old school playbook. That doesn't work anymore.
That's really interesting. Thank you for all the comments about revenue and NIL and the money flows. I have a specific proposal for you, I guess, and I'm going to rely on your days as a player personnel director more to talk transfer portal with you than your current role. So just to humor me, one of the things that's come up obviously this season in college football is the Nico transfer situation, and I'm not going to press you on that because I imagine that you have some stories or history there, having been at UCLA and such. But I guess the question that I then will propose an answer to hear what your thoughts are is, how do we shift the problem of guys developing guys somewhere only for them to leave after somebody else, quote, better shows interest? So they're recruiting, coaches are recruiting nonstop with really nothing to show for it. So that's the question. And my proposal to you, based on my own thoughts plus some online chatter, is the idea of moving to a European model of transfer fees where there's buyouts and for players such that are the coaches get paid them. I mean, Jimbo famously for 70+ million at A&M, right? Like, why not the schools? And so if a G5 player, gets recruited to Ohio State or Oregon because, they're offering a, quote, better school and brand. And I know that we're, like you said, moving to constraints, but what about compensating those group of fives for the buyout fees and the transfer fees if players choose to transfer?
Yeah, a lot to cover here, right? Like,
yeah,
fascinating topic. I will say this to your point on constraint before we address this, holistically. The group of 4 and the group of 6 schools, are the Power 4 and the group of 6 are faced on a cash liquidity problem, right? So like, while they are going for brand, right, they're usually going for more attractive deals too, because Ohio State fully funded at 12.8 million, like they are, versus Boise State fully funded because they could raise or line item 7 million out. That's the difference in economics. So right, that player could go from Boise to Ohio State and make twice as much money. So like just to share the problem, like beyond the constraint problems, that problem is real, right? So like group of 6 programs have to figure this out, right? So circling back around to the European model, like you call it, right? The answer is all in contracts. There's no question to me, whether it is buybacks, payouts. I do think multi-year protections are likely more realistic than any sort of CSC supported economics where schools are compensating one another, because it's one, you start dealing with conference-based litigation, because all these, and we talk about this in the book, but like so much of this governance is driven by the leagues collectively, and they're all going to have their own set of rules. And like what you'd hate to see is the SEC saying, well, we're never going to pay a Big Ten school, and like adopting some rule because they're our rival, right? And then it's like, well, so this player now can't go to a Big Ten school because you have a rule. Like, it opens up a lot of, well, we don't want to fuel our enemies, but that's really antitrust behavior, so they're going to get sued, right? So like, there's a lot of loopholes there with any sort of buyback. Will that happen? I don't know. I'm sort of pontificating here, but the answer is contractual, because every school I talk to and we consult with, it's the multi-year deals. That's where the ball is right now, because you look, and we mentioned the Xavier Lucas case with Miami versus Wisconsin. That's why it's so important, because if Boise State can sign a kid out of high school to a 3-year deal, they can now go develop that guy, and he's staying because he has to. He has a contract, right? And that's a protectable contract. And you talk about the development of young athletes. Well, if that's our goal, then let's set it down contractually. And if they can enforce that, we have a chance at real development happening and being protected, which is great for the sport, right? Like, and that's great for fandom. It's great for tradition, et cetera, right? And that gets to, I think, the desired outcome of the European model. Is there an economic way to pay that instead of protect that, right? Where if Ashton Jeanty leaves Boise, instead of them having him for that extra year, they get compensated. Potentially, there's so many complicated legal and institutional laws that might be cumbersome there, where I probably hesitate to say that's the future. I think everybody would be intrigued by that model. It's a fun model. It solves a lot of problems. But right now, the focus seems to be on how do we see if multi-year protections are even possible contractually.
That's an answer informed by experience, unlike mine informed by internet chat rooms. So,
well, it's fueled by desire, right? Because it would be fun to cover.
Yeah, it would.
What a great story that would be. Boise State gets $12 million transfer fee for Ashton JT. Like, wow, like what a story, right?
Again, and you brought up Boise, and I may have this wrong, Ethan, but my recollection is that they just got a $500 million private equity investment in their athletic department. Am I making that up?
I don't claim to know the specifics of that. I've seen the reporting.
Yeah.
And I know several other schools are looking into private equity. I will share this just high level opinion on private equity.
Yeah.
Their MO is that they want to come in and provide cash and strategic expertise to change your business outcomes. We all love cash, right? Especially these schools right now, especially schools that want to compete and don't have the bandwidth to currently and think they can buy their way into competing long enough to get a bid from a league that will drive their finances to continue to compete, right? That's the value prop. It's like if Boise makes the playoffs 2 more times, maybe they get a Big 12 invite or something, right? Like that's their desired end state. The problem is like, what is the strategic guidance? Because every time I've been in a room with private equity talk football, the strategic guidance has been like, whoa, you don't even understand this space at all. So, and we've seen it with broadcast too, right? There's a lot of leagues looking at taking private equity. There's a lot of broadcast ties to that with their media rights. I find that the private equity rigor is a 1 out of 10 compared to any athletic department, which I already wrote a book about, is not enough. So I would struggle to recommend that any school get in bed with private equity because you're selling a piece of your soul to someone that doesn't understand your mission. And I struggle with that. I don't claim to know the economics of the Boise deal. Maybe they have no say. Maybe it's all, doctored and papered. I don't know, but that would be my hesitation.
Sure. Got it. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit because this is BLEAV in Baylor and move. I know you're high on the Baylor Bears this year. You shared with me. So yeah, give us your thoughts on our team this year. We're obviously 1-1 sitting here after a big win against SMU, and on the podcast we rep the Bears pretty hard. Very big fans of Sawyer Robertson and the boys. We think he's a Heisman candidate. But I've lovingly maybe being too much of a fan called it a JV game this week against Sanford. And then we get into the meat of it with some Big 12 play, which is looking, frankly, Ethan, a little bit more manageable these days after Arizona State goes down and Oklahoma State goes down and K-State's playing close games. So, give us your thoughts on the Bears this year.
Look, I'll just start with this. I'd like to get on my podium here, address the Baylor fan base and say, like, the rhetoric right now, where you guys are at, you guys have a lot to be excited about because there's a lot of pessimism in the fan base right now. I get last game was crazy and it didn't start well and you lost in week 1. But you guys have it all in front of you right now. And you guys have played potentially the most battle-tested schedule of anybody in the country and come out of it still alive, right? And anytime you have Sawyer Robertson playing the way he is, and I don't know if there's a tougher quarterback in college football, you have a chance. And I have October 16th scheduled on my calendar, appointment viewing, when you go into TCU and play a massive game, which I think could be a Big 12 play-in game for the conference championship for a then potential bid for the college football playoff. Obviously, you have a lot of tests before there, right? You got to go into Tempe in a couple weeks here. That would be a massive one. And I know everybody's down on Arizona State right now. They're not ranked, but Kenny Dillingham is one of the best coaches I have ever gone up against. I do not count him out of a game. He beat us once without a quarterback. Don't watch that film. They were playing a tight end at Wildcat. It was incredible. He is one of the best coaches I have ever seen. So you can't ever count them out. And that Mississippi State team is really underrated. You know this as a Baylor fan. Blake Shapen can play. Mm-hmm. And he's another tough, hard-nosed player. That team's better than people give credit for. Going into Starkville, that's a tough place to play. I'm not counting Arizona State as an easy win by any stretch. But and look, there will be tests, but that game against TCU feels like that will be a massive one. And, the winner is probably sitting pretty for a bid to control their own destiny. And look, that's all you can ask for in today's world, right? Everybody talks about non-conference play, but if you control your destiny, and Baylor got a good draw this year in conference play, like we got to call that out, right? Like there are teams they don't play that are competitive and good. And in years you get that draw, how that plays out is all that matters. The non-con is just flavors on the cake, right? It's icing. And this team's battle tested. Sawyer Robertson hasn't turned the ball over this year against a battle tested schedule. I mean, you throw the LSU game on from last year and compare to this two, there's not a quarterback that's run for more yards, less turnovers, and looked really good doing it. The supporting cast is as strong as ever. Like you got Kobe Prentice coming in from Alabama. Bryson Washington is a really talented back. And look, Dave Aranda has there's a lot of thoughts out there on Dave Aranda, but there is not many that have revolutionized college defensive scheme like he has over the last decade. And if that's their limitation is defensive personnel, because look, they lost one of their starting safeties to Louisville in the portal, right? They had some hits there, but I'd put Dave Aranda's ability to navigate through that up with anybody. And the Big 12, high and low, there's so much parity this year, right? It's going to take some balls bouncing the other way. And my bet is I want to bet on the toughest, hard-nosed quarterback in that league to see his way through that. And to me, it's clear it's Sawyer Robertson.
Yeah, we're on record here of being big Kenny Dillingham fans ourselves, in spite of him being a conference coach. So you're singing, that's music to my ears and to my listeners' ears, Ethan. But hey, man, listen, you've been a sport being here, and I really appreciate all the time and all the knowledge. This has been super educational for me and super entertaining, I hope, for the crew that listens. So. Just want to thank you again, man, for your time and your expertise and spending it with us. And, if there's if you could tell the people where to find your book and where to find you and give us all the details of how we can stay in touch with you and all your work.
Yeah, Alvin, I greatly appreciate it too. It's been great being on. You can follow me on Twitter at Ethan Young FB. You can buy my book on Amazon, The Transformation of College Football. And if you buy it, give it a rating. That really helps me with the algorithm. That's what they tell me to say. So, really appreciate the opportunity, Alvin, and always happy to talk Baylor and especially Sawyer Robertson. It's always fun.